Yeah, what's up, everybody? Welcome in. This is FST Fantasy Sports Today. My name's Matt Striker. His name's Joe Pisapia. And guess what, folks? The band is back together. Behind the glass, some familiar faces. I don't know what kind of antics are going to go down on this show, but I, for one, am smiling. And Joe, I've got to welcome you in. There's a lot to talk about. Smiling is going to be my theme here because we're going to talk about something going on in baseball that can easily make fantasy managers, DFS players, and wagerers pull their hair out. But before we get to that, welcome home. Welcome back. You had an amazing journey that I followed on social media. And speaking of social media, folks, at SportsGrid and at SportsGrid TV, those are our social media handles. You're going to want to follow along. A lot of information is going to be coming down here on this show. But Joe, you went to the granddaddy of them all, did you not? Take us on your journey.
I did. It was 25 years since Joey P had been to a WrestleMania live in person. It was in Philadelphia. It was The Rock versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. It was 1999. It was a long time ago. And 25 years later, I got to attend another one with my daughters this time. And it was a legendary WrestleMania. Night 1, night 2, we went to all of them. It was incredible. One of the great live experiences I've ever had, and I've been to Taylor Swift, so I know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about incredible live experiences. But it really was. I mean, to see Cody Rhodes come away with the championship, to see the overbooked, incredibly fun ending to that match, but all the long-term storytelling, all the stuff that we love about professional wrestling, and to share with the family and multiple friends, and of course, look, sometimes when you go to certain sporting events, it could be a rough situation, all this stuff. Not wrestling crowd, man, they are excited. They're happy to be there. Yeah. I've only had really good experiences for the most part at wrestling shows, and it was I would say an unforgettable, legendary moment there that I know the world seems to be talking about. This is a baseball and football show. We're going to have football in hour 2, some NFL draft stuff. We're going to have baseball stuff, but man, oh man, Matt Striker, it just seemed wrong not to talk about WrestleMania this morning because it was a special event.
Yeah, I'm glad. Well done by you. And without giving away too much, when you spend in the mid 4 figures, not only are you a great father, a great friend, but you are a fan. But you can't put a price on experience. So let's steer it now back to what this show does. We're here to try to do our best. And we've been successful, knock wood, thus far, Joe. I think you'd agree, helping folks out in season-long fantasy, DFS, and straight-up wagering. But something's going on in baseball that we need to attack. We need to understand. Is it a Tommy John epidemic? Is what is happening to these pitchers? And before we came on the air, Joe, we started the conversation. We were careful to have it play out here on the air. You were going all the way back to 2012 and listing names, and we were having some fun with these names. But what's going on and how do we help ourselves from a wagering perspective here?
Well, first of all, this is not uncommon. What's uncommon is that it's happening right now to some really big names. I mean, it's happening to the best pitchers in baseball. I know I had a lot of early wagers in Garrett Cole and Spencer Strider, right, and a lot of that just got lit on fire. So I feel your pain. And for those people who had early fantasy investments in those same players, is a very difficult time. But you're seeing an average of 30 plus every single year get Tommy John at the major league level. Or should I say even the minor league into the major league level, those guys are on 40-man rosters. If you go back to 2012, and I remembered this specifically because I remember being on air, Sirius XM radio back in the day, and every week it seemed like we were getting another April, just slate of Tommy John injuries. So I went back and looked, and sure enough, that was a big spike year. It was 46 that year, and some pretty big names on that list as well, some of the bigger ones. And that is really tough to start the season. Now, what I would say is this, the only upside of that is there's going to be a lot more streaming pitchers to come. You're going to be a lot more guys who are going to come through rotations in the next 5+ months that you can stream or try to pick up or be ahead. We're going to try to talk about some young pitchers in this next segment we're doing here to try to get ahead of the game a little bit, some guys that you might want to stash right now. But what's really going on, Matt, and I had Tommy John Jr. on my show a few years ago, who was a pitcher in his youth, who ended up getting an injury, moved into youth sports medicine because he wanted to help younger athletes. And he said something that was very just completely logical and backed up by science, and he's got a great book about it too. Everyone should go check it out. But basically what he said is youth baseball is what's really doing this, whether it be in the academies that you get in the Caribbean, whether it be here in the States, this all year round baseball that you're getting these kids playing, especially the pitchers, they're not growing properly in terms of their arm strength, their elbow strength. They're doing the same repetitive motions over and over and over again. He would get these kids who would show up at 16 years old, 17 years old, who had the elbows of 50-year-old, 60-year-old men. And he said it was because of the constant repetitive motion of what they're doing. And it is an epidemic, and nobody wants to stop it because the carrot at the end, the prize, is so large.
Right.
Major League Baseball guaranteed money is such an incredible pull, or even just college scholarships for some people. It's such a big draw that nobody wants to slow this train down. But at the end of the day, that's what this is. And that's why you're seeing these guys when they hit their 20s have this surgery. You're seeing max velocity. That's a problem. The pitch clock, I don't think, is a problem, to be honest with you. It's a different thing. It's certainly something that changed. But if you go back and you look at the 80s and the 70s, guys worked incredibly fast back then for the most part. Like, it was something like the speed of the game was very different. It's much more like it is now, whether it be a pitch clock or not. So for me, I go back to the science of it, and I go back to, Dr. Tommy John Jr. and his entire, legacy here is working with these kids, trying to foster a better relationship between youth athletes and youth sports. And until we fix that, we're going to continue to have this, and it's going to change the way we value pitching. It's going to start to feel like the way running backs are in the NFL. Eventually, pitching is going to be like that in Major League Baseball if we're not careful.
Now, I don't want to be calloused about it, but at the end of the day, it's my job to mitigate losses in an ever-changing market. So while all of this deserves its own segment, if not its own show, I'm not a social issue guy. This isn't a social issue show. How, as wagerers, as fantasy players, as DFS players, do we get around this? And I think I have figured out finding that pitcher. If you look at the holds category, finding that pitcher that you can look for in low leverage mid-inning situations, that SPRP, if you will, try to collectively build these kind of guys that are going to go every day or every other day and kind of help your ratios in lieu of, man, if you've lost to Spencer Strider and maybe you grabbed Eduardo Rodriguez on the back end and now now you're really going to start fishing. Do you want to be streaming pitchers mid-April? I don't know about you, but I don't. So these are conversations we can have on top of the fact that guys are getting the call to come up for the Orioles, and the Rangers are actually, the Royals are actually really good. So we're going to talk about all this and more. Joe, in the last 45 seconds, what's standing out to you most?
Well, look, a few things. The Jackson Holiday call-up, very exciting. Obviously, he's been pressing a little bit, got a day off yesterday. He's going to be fine, folks. Don't worry. He's a fantastic player. He's been red hot. The Royals have been red hot, too, which is really good for baseball. Kansas City's a great baseball town. Bobby Witt, we're going to talk about, maybe, and these guys in the conversation for MVP that we should be talking about more. That rotation's been really good. And, of course, the Shohei Ohtani iPay scandal, quote unquote. He was charged with bank fraud. Ohtani is right now not somebody that we're really looking at. And I think by the time we turn the page to Memorial Day, it's going to be kind of a distant memory story. So a lot of baseball stuff to talk about. The good news is there's a lot of good baseball still happening, not just the major league level, but the minor leagues as well. When we come back, we're going to look down at the farm. Some guys can help your fantasy team in the months to come. We'll be right back after this.
People that bashed him will be eating their words this year.
Pretty heavily favored to be a first-round pick, minus 400 earlier this week. But that's not the surprise.
If you're drafting J.J. McCarthy in the first half of the first round, you clearly believe not only is he a starter, he's going to be your starter for years to come. But
a popular bet was under 3.5 wide receivers in the first round.
The tape doesn't lie, baby.
Only on SportsGrid. There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Jason Tatum has games where he has stinkers. He shoots a 4 for 16. Jaylen Brown in the playoffs gets exposed because he can't go left. Porzingis gets old. Sometimes Jrue Holiday's not consistent. Al Horford father time to catch up. That being said, I still think they're going to the NBA Finals and winning it. And I'm a Knicks fan. I hate the Celtics with all of my might.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
They're still the best. They're still the champs. Everyone wants to crown the Celtics the champions, but that's not the way it works. They got to beat them. And, they got to get through the East, which isn't going to be fun to begin with. Everyone thinks it's so automatic.
If it's just Boris is kind of losing his power, if whatever his tactics have been, yeah, move on.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Memphis owns it. They beat them 5 straight times. And Memphis is awful. So what does that say about the Bucks? They're the most overrated team in the NBA, hands down.
Michigan and Boston College, there's going to be goals scored in this game. But, with that being stated, the total's up to 7.5 right now. I got to go under 7.5 here, Scott.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell Coast to Coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Great.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in. This is FST, and it is you get what you give. Honestly, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. I love what I do. FST, Fantasy Sports Today. Thank God. Matt Striker, Joe Pisapia with you here. Big tip of the cap to everybody behind the glass making it happen. And, of course, to all of you. We open the show on a down note, a Debbie Downer, talking about every pitcher is falling off. Every pitcher, everyone is drafted in season long is falling off. You go into DFS, you're rolling the dice. With regards to wagering, you're honestly looking at first threes, maybe K-props, because you don't know what's out there. Well, Joe, let's talk about what is out there. Down on the farm, we live in a different time now where these can become relevant names in the next 4, 6, 8 weeks, and they're going to matter. So let's go down on the farm with Cowboy Joe. And please do your best, most insensitive, Southern accent thing bit. Please do it, though. Come on, tempting you.
No. Listen, I will say this is the perfect guy, having the conversation we just had, in between the break. This is the perfect guy to start this segment with, James Wood, because James Wood is that guy that had a phenomenal spring. He looked fantastic, and so far he's carried that over into the minor leagues. Look at this, 34 at-bats so far, 12 runs for the Nationals AAA squad. He's got 15 hits going into this weekend's action, 2 homers, 2 steals, hitting .441 with a .558 OBP and a .1352 OPS. I mean, that is dramatic. That is incredibly good. And who's really stopping him right now, right? You've got Eddie Rosario out there. You've got Jesse Winker out there. Those guys aren't the future. Right. James Wood is the future. So my guess is we're going to give him somewhere around, 100 at-bats, and you're going to see him. I mean, it could even be sooner. We'll see. But I just don't know what's left for James Wood to prove. He has done a really good job year over year of trimming that strikeout rate down a little bit, progressing forward. This was the big piece that came over in the Juan Soto deal. And if we're going to look back here, and you're going to have C.J. Abrams You're going to have James Wood. You're going to have something to show for that deal if you're the Washington Nationals. I know it's been rough. Our producer, Sam Yarnell, big Nats fan, it's been rough ever since the World Series. He is, you can count the innings on one hand of all the Steven Strasburg starts, Sam, if you want. But it's really been a wait now to see if that deal can pay off and remake this organization. And James Wood right now is a player that's available in a lot of leagues. Obviously, in dynasty leagues, he's been scooped up a long time ago. But in your redraft leagues, he's probably still floating around there. And I would add him speculatively now, because the last thing you want to do is have him continue to be red hot in April, continue the buzz get greater in the national media, and the next thing you know, he gets the call, and then you have a Jackson Holiday situation where everybody has to run to the waiver wire and drop a bunch of fab. I know some leagues don't let you draft rookies. There's all these different rules. James Wood should be picked up if you can get him still, because right now, I don't know if there's many bats as hot as James Wood right now in AAA.
I'm with you all the time, especially when it comes to the names that people need to know. But the one thing I will say, again, for season-long managers is that it is barely tax day, the middle of April. If you have flexibility on your roster, that's fine if you have room. But if you're this manager and you think that this one guy is going to make the difference, and you drafted poorly, right? You have to think about that, because I don't want to have to spend so early on here. It's a long season, Joe. We talk about it all the time. It's such a long season. It's a different beast. We talked about pitching. Let's go down on the farm now. And if anyone wants to talk about the Mets, it's going to be Joe Pisapia, folks. I mean, this is the author of the Black Book series. It's available now. He doesn't let his fandom get in the way, and I love that about you as an analyst. As a friend, you and I can hold each other in a hockey fight and wail away, because I'm a Cardinal fan, but I love it. But down on the farm, the Mets may have some hope. What do you got?
Yeah, if this was 1985, 86, we could have some, Tommy Herr, Wally Backman style fights. But by the way, I always hated Tommy Herr just based off his blonde, curly hair.
His hair was great. His curls, his locks.
Just the blonde, curly hair alone, just completely, I don't know what kind of perm that guy had.
So if he and Glenn Hubbard showed up to a bar, you'd just be ready to throw down. Who the hell are these guys? Come on, Vinny, Tommy, let's get them.
It's like a bad tag team from the NWA. Let's look at Christian Scott from the New York Mets. Christian Scott has been really good, kind of a meteoric rise. And again, this is despite my fandom that I'll ever put a Met on a graphic here. But we're going to talk about this guy, because look at that strikeout number. 9 innings, 19 strikeouts so far. That's an enormous number. Once again, it's not just talent, it's opportunity. And opportunity is going to show itself. Sean Manaea, the bloom was off the rose. It was a fun little start to the year, a couple good starts, and he gave up 8 runs yesterday. So I think we can get past that. So what's in the Mets rotation? Well, Kodai Senga is working his way back, throwing off flat ground, so he's still a ways away. Adrian Hauser is pedestrian. Sean Manaea, I think we all know exactly what Sean Manaea is. Luis Severino, all right, he's probably going to stick around because they paid him. We'll see what he is, and Jose Quintana's going to stick around. There's going to be opportunity in this Mets rotation. And Christian Scott's one of these guys that is going to get an opportunity at some point in time. You've had injuries to McGill. You've had injuries here in this rotation. Buto is another pitcher, Jose Buto, in the Mets system, who came up, had a start in the doubleheader, who I really liked in spring. He works very quickly. He's really attacks the strike zone. So there are a couple of arms here, Buto and Christian Scott, in this Mets system that I do think you're going to see make 10 to 12 starts at some point for this team. So if you're in deeper leagues, these are guys to at least monitor. I'm not saying you have to pick them up right now, but Christian Scott's a guy to put on that watch list and see how the next few starts go, because as you said, it is only April. So if we can get into May and things are going really well for Christian Scott, but maybe not so well for the Mets rotation, or an injury should show itself, Scott could be a guy that gets a call, and he doesn't have a lot of the fanfare that a lot of other prospects have, because he's kind of, I don't want to say come out of nowhere, but really in the last year had a really big push there where the developmentally he's really taken a big step forward, and it shows it because he is dominating with the whiff rate, dominating with the strikeout rate.
Love it. A great job as always. I mean, Joe is that guy, that friend that you hang out with him and you listen to what he says. How many of you do it? You can do it now while I'm talking, because I don't say anything of any magnitude. But during the break, you're going to go run to the waiver wire. You know you are. You know you're looking him up right now. Scott, S-C-O-T. Remember Mike Scott? All right, let's go out to Colorado here, because I think see, now here we go.
Let me her and Mike Scott in the same segment.
Yes.
Why are you doing this to me? What are you doing?
Because
Why are you doing this?
I missed you through
This is
WrestleMania,
what happens when
finishing
we're away
the
from each
story
other
and
for
your
3
moments
weeks.
and your photographs of living your life. Anyway, people run to Colorado because it's an easy fix. It's cheap. and it's still good. Now, I think people did it with Nolan Jones, and we'll talk about Nolan Jones in a little bit. But there's another player that people are going to want to keep their eye on out in Colorado.
Yeah, there's another name too, Jordan Beck, outfielder for the Colorado Rockies. And look, you always love Colorado bats because, you know, they're going to get to play in that air. 40 at-bats so far going into the weekend. He's got 3 homers, 9 RBI, hitting 275. But again, that OPS is over 1,000 right now for him. Yeah, it's in the PCL, but still, this is a guy to watch. He had a really good showing during spring too. A lot of scouts are very impressed with what they saw to him. You're looking, again, opportunity. Brenton Doyle ahead of him in the outfield. Charlie Blackmon could be a guy that's moved on from at some point this year as the Rockies continue to show they have no plan. So that's another guy to watch. Also, another name, too, with the Chicago Cubs organization, gotten off to a great start in AAA so far, Thomas Pannone. Now, Pannone is a starting pitcher, another lefty. They've already got Justin Steele and Shoto Imanaga in that rotation, but Steele's working his way back. Pannone is a guy that so far has been tremendous over 2 starts so far in April. 15 innings, 17 strikeouts. He's got 2 wins already, a .57 ERA, a .70 whip. If you look at this rotation for the Cubs here, you know, Kyle Hendricks has kind of been a mainstay. Javier Assad, Jordan Wicks, Ben Brown. I don't know. Those are the guys necessarily that are going to hold down the fort the rest of the time. I will say this. Imanaga, I think, is for real. We always said that going into this season. I'm a big fan of Justin Steele. Pannone could be another one of these guys like Christian Scott, who could make 10 to 12 starts at some point in time for the Cubs. And I think the Cubs, you and I agree, are going to be in the thick of that National League Central all the way to the end. So this is another guy maybe to at least monitor and maybe stash, depending on how deep your league is. So I get it. It's been a frustrating week for pitchers and anybody who owned or spent any significant draft capital on pitchers. But help is on the way, dear, in the words of Mrs. Doubtfire. When we come back, more Major League Baseball. That's right. We're going to talk about some underrated arms. Maybe you can pull off in a trade that could help your rotation, because we are here to fix your teams. When we come back, we're going to do just that. Don't go anywhere. More FST right after this.
People that bashed him will be eating their words this year.
Pretty heavily favored to be a first-round pick, minus 400 earlier this week. But that's not the surprise.
If you're drafting J.J. McCarthy in the first half of the first round, you clearly believe not only is he a starter, he's going to be your starter for years to come. But
a popular bet was under 3.5 wide receivers in the first round.
The tape doesn't lie, baby.
Only on SportsGrid.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Jason Tatum has games where he has stinkers. He shoots a 4 for 16. Jaylen Brown in the playoffs gets exposed because he can't go left. Porzingis gets old. Sometimes Drew Holiday's not consistent. Al Horford father time to catch up. That being said, I still think they're going to the NBA Finals and winning it. And I'm a Knicks fan. I hate the Celtics with all of my might.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
They're still the best. They're still the champs. Everyone wants to crown the Celtics the champions, but that's not the way it works. They got to beat them. And, you know, they got to get through the East, which isn't going to be fun to begin with. Everyone thinks it's so automatic.
If it's just Boris is kind of losing his power, if whatever his tactics have been, yeah, move on.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Memphis owns it. They beat them 5 straight times. And Memphis is awful. So what does that say about the Bucks? They're the most overrated team in the NBA, hands down.
Michigan and Boston College, there's going to be goals scored in this game. But, with that being stated, the total's up to 7.5 right now. I got to go under 7.5 here, Scott.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. Your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell Coast to Coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Great.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports Today. Matt and Joe with you here, giving you everything you need in order to dominate. And the theme of this show has been, with everything going on, with all these pitchers going down, we understand that in season long, you invested quite a bit of draft capital. In DFS, it's kind of becoming a crapshoot. In wagering, you're having to alter your style, and no one likes to do that. So we've been trying to figure out a way to mitigate all that loss. And now it's time for a segment that I think was Joe's name in high school, is Underrated Arms. Because what this is about, more so than anything, is trying to find pitching. And for me, it's to avoid the stream. I don't want to be streaming this early, but if you have to, so be it. But we have some underrated arms here, Joe, that people are going to want to hear about. So let's talk first. Let's go to Texas. And K-props are the way to go here. But you think that Cody Bradford could be an underrated arm for a stream?
Well, look, he certainly has been. I think everybody was skeptical after that first start, but now we're 3 starts into the Cody Bradford, 19 innings. He's given up just 3 earned runs over those 3 starts, 17 strikeouts, just 2 walks. Is he this good? Probably not. But a 1.40 ERA and a .62 whip, I mean, those are numbers that you just can't ignore now. So he's rostered in a fair amount of leagues. He's probably available in about 25% or so. So if he's still available, pick him up. But I think even the person that picked him up probably isn't thinking, all right, Cody Bradford is not really a guy that I'm super excited about every week, or I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, and that's all fair. But I think if you look a little deeper into this Texas rotation, look, you're not going to get Max Scherzer back probably till somewhere around June 1st. Now, knowing Max Scherzer is probably going to be a little earlier than that because the guy's an animal, and that's just who he is. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him before Memorial Day. Evaldi's pitched really well. John Gray's pitched really well. But Dane Dunning, Andrew Heaney, look, there's opportunity where you could see either more injuries creeping up at some point or performance being an issue for somebody else. And if Bradford just continues to stay on track with what he's doing right now, and of course that 1.4 ERA is going to regress. It's not going to be there. In fact, you could even wait for maybe a start where he's just sort of human and then pounce on it. But that's a pitcher that might actually stick around in the rotation longer than people realize. He was named the 5th starter. It was a bit of a question mark going into spring who that 5th guy was going to be because of the injuries. But Texas gotten off to a good start here. Offensively, it's a team that's going to give you good run support. You don't have to worry about that. Yeah, they lost Josh Young, but still they have a lot of good bats in that lineup. The Seagers, the Simeons, Wyatt Langford will hit. Evan Carter starting to pick things up a little bit. So I think Cody Bradford is one of the names that we could throw out there and say, if he's available in your shallow league, pick him up. If he is available via trade, let's say you have a surplus of hitting, somebody needs an outfielder, you've got extra bats to spare. That's the kind of trade you make right now, and see if Cody Bradford's a guy that ends up having a nice surprise season, not just a nice surprise April. And that's one of the guys that you could put on that list of guys that can help you if you've been part of this incredible rash of pitching injuries. And it has been really tough. Like, if you have survived this right now, I mean, your luck is very good, because I feel like this pitching injury bug has hit just about everybody's fantasy teams on some level. So if you are still healthy, that's great, but chances are you're not, and chances are a guy like Bradford can help you out.
We continue to look for players that can help you out. Now, this next player, I'm uncertain of his availability in leagues, just because I know that players that have pitchers, especially that have locked-in slots in the first 3 slots in a rotation, are usually going to be gobbled up, at least in the leagues in which I'm used to playing. But this next pitcher, Joe, you and I seem to have a great difference of opinion. If here we are at this point in April talking about this next guy, again, I do worry for the way a lot of people drafted.
Well, it's funny because we talked about a lot of the late pitchers, right? Guys who are going to be available late that could be good starting pitchers. And one of them was Seth Lugo. And I wrote him up in the Black Book this year when I write up all the pitchers. Lugo really stuck out to me because it was really good work. He is rostered in 70% of leagues. That means he's available in 30% still. After 3 starts, 18 innings, just 3 earned runs. The strikeouts have been low. Okay, that's fine, but the ERA, 1.45, the whip has been really solid. Bradford, again, rostered in more leagues than Seth Lugo, which I think is kind of interesting there because I think Lugo is a better pitcher from what we've seen last year. But again, the strikeouts have been a little down. Actually, I'm sorry, that number's incorrect. The strikeouts are 17 in 19 innings. Pardon me, that graphic is incorrect. But so 17 strikeouts, 2 walks over 19 innings. A tremendous start here for Cody Bradford. And then for Seth Lugo, another guy too who we are waiting for, the Kansas City Royals to slow down. And at some point they might. But I think going into the season, we were talking about who would be the surprise teams. The Royals were on our list because they did go out and get Michael Wacha. They did get Seth Lugo. They seemed like if Brady Singer could, have a good spring and the new pitch he was working on, if that was going to have an impact. You saw some of the young bats coming through the system. Bobby Witt looks like a star. And I'm going to correct my correction. Cody Bradford, 17 strikeouts, Seth Lugo, 9. So that is correct. So the strikeout rate is low for Seth Lugo. This is what happens. See, I'm going to get all the guys mad at me in the truck. Don't get mad at me. Everything's fine. This is what happens when you take 1 week off. You come back and then everything's all crazy for you. But Seth Lugo, if you look at last season for San Diego, I think a year that a lot of people didn't see coming, don't believe in it. He threw 146 innings. So had 140 strikeouts in that time, 36 walks. So he is a player that if he can just uptick that strikeout rate a little bit here, back to normal, back to what it was last year, Seth Lugo could be a really useful guy that it's not just a matchup play. He's a guy that you might just leave in there because the Royals and Bobby Witt Jr. and Michael Garcia at the top of this order now and Pasquantino starting to hit a little bit. The Royals are going to make some noise, and Cleveland is vulnerable, especially with Bieber out. They could be a team that ends up selling off a lot of pieces. The White Sox are not a good team. Detroit, unfortunately. So I guess the question is, besides the Twins, why not the Kansas City Royals? Why can't the Royals be somebody who challenge for this division? And Seth Lugo is going to be one of these pieces along with Reagan's at the top of that rotation. They're going to keep them, I think, very competitive all year. So that would be another guy worth adding or worth making a deal where you get that kind of pitcher back.
I'm so glad you gave the honest emotion of why not? And I get it. But at this point, again, I always steer it back to the wagering side. I'm trying to build a bankroll come Memorial Day. You and I have talked about this strategy because I don't want to be playing with my, or dare I say my wife's, money, or it's now all hers. But you get what I'm trying to say. So I'm trying to build the bankroll. So I'm not playing the why not. This next pitcher and then the one after, we had a conversation during our preview of the season talking about while everyone is looking over there, we're going to go over here and find hopefully an uninterrupted pool of pitchers. I'm talking about the Boston Red Sox. Let's start with Garrett Whitlock, and then I'll let you get yourself to the next one. But there is still, as long as more and more people aren't watching and listening to the show, there's still really unimpeded waters here that I'd much rather go there than to the why nots, as you were alluding to earlier. Go.
Yeah, look, Whitlock was also on that same list of pitchers we talked about of value starting pitchers. 3 games, 14 innings, 16 strikeouts, 6 walks, a 1.26 ERA, a 1.19 whip. The Whitlock stock went up significantly when Giolito got hurt. We liked Whitlock before. Cutter Crawford, Tanner Houck, all these guys were on our radar. We talked about these guys in February, March, right here on the show. Hey, throw $1 on this pitcher. Throw some late draft capital on some of these arms because Boston might be a 500 team if these arms actually perform up to their abilities and just throw quality starts and keep them in games. And guess what? Right now, they're a game over 500 to start the year. So I don't think the Red Sox are a team that's going anywhere either necessarily in this division. The Blue Jays might be going somewhere, especially if Gossman doesn't get right. That could be a situation that gets bad quickly. But Garrett Whitlock, rostered in 66% of leagues. He is still available widely. He's a pitcher that should be scooped up by now. I don't think he's going anywhere in this rotation. I know it's been tough, and he's a guy that I personally have touted before, and things have not worked out for him. But for the same reasons I've been excited about him, it's why I'm just going to go back to that well again. I do think eventually this guy's going to get it, and I think he's showing that it's starting to happen for him. He's also a big pitcher, 6'5", 222. Sometimes those bigger guys, Matt, you know this from a mechanical standpoint, take a little longer at the big league level to find the consistency, and I think he's found that in his delivery. It's never been a question of, velocity or stuff. It's always been a question of consistency. And I think Whitlock is finally finding that, and that health is a big part of it too. He's finally healthy. So Whitlock's been really good. Another guy in this Boston rotation that's been very good, Cutter Crawford. 3 games so far, 15 innings for him, giving up just 1 earned run, 18 strikeouts, 8 walks, a .57 ERA, and a .96 whip. Tanner Houck is another guy you could throw into this grouping as well. Houck has performed very well this year, but all of these Red Sox arms right now, basically every night, they're giving you an opportunity to, like I said, go out there, drop you 5-6 good innings, keep the Red Sox in games. Now the question is, Whitlock, Crawford, Houck, for you, Matt, is there one of these guys that you prefer over the others that you think is really more worthy of the investment? Because I think they're all investable. They're all guys that I would like to have on my team right now, especially if I had some pitching injuries. Bobby Miller just went on the IL this weekend. Nobody really knew that was going to happen. That was a big surprise. I'm still a Whitlock guy, but I'm curious, is Whitlock at the top of your list?
It's a great question to ask. So Cutter Crawford has been paying dividends for me on 2 fronts. So it's been from the DFS perspective as well as from the wagering perspective. So I'm leaning that way. As far as a full-on, I think Garrett Whitlock is going to be a mumuch more familiar name to season-long fantasy managers. But depending on where you are, Cutter Crawford for me is the guy. He's just, I like fun pitchers, and I like how it matches up also. And to an overall point, right now the SP3 is the SP1 because all the SP1s have fallen away. So if we were going to have to re-rank and re-tier all of our pitchers, everyone takes a step, if not a step and a half to 2 steps up. And don't forget, Jordan Montgomery is going to make his start. I think it's the end of this week. So you're starting to see some of these names that maybe looked a little smarter coming in later on in the season, except for Blake Snell. But there you go.
The Red Sox are an interesting team to keep an eye on. Costa's starting to hit a little bit, picking things up with the power. Tyler O'Neill's gotten off to a fantastic start. Rafael is a really exciting young player. And Jarren Duran, I mean, he's been hitting everything. Stealing bases, doing everything we want. Our favorite value outfielder has been brilliant. Don't sleep on the Red Sox, folks. The Red Sox might be a little bit more competitive all year than people realize. And if you're looking at that win total, I think you might want to go over 500 for them right now. They might be that team as long as this pitching stays healthy. When we return, 3 up and 3 down. Who's gotten off to a good start and who wishes they could forget April? We'll tell you after this.
People that bashed him will be eating their words this year. Pretty heavily favored to be a first-round pick, minus 400 earlier this week. But that's not the surprise.
If you're drafting J.J. McCarthy in the first half of the first round, you clearly believe not only is he a starter, he's going to be your starter for years to come. But
a popular bet was under 3.5 wide receivers in the first round.
The tape doesn't lie, baby.
Only on SportsGrid.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than game time decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Jason Tatum has games where he has stinkers. He shoots a 4 for 16. Jaylen Brown in the playoffs gets exposed because he can't go left. Porzingis gets old. Sometimes Drew Holiday's not consistent. Al Horford, Father Time can catch up. That being said, I still think they're going to the NBA Finals and winning it. And I'm a Knicks fan. I hate the Celtics with all of my might.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
They're still the best. They're still the champs. Everyone wants to crown the Celtics the champions, but that's not the way it works. They got to beat them. And, they got to get through the East, which isn't going to be fun to begin with. Everyone thinks it's so automatic.
If it's just Boris is kind of losing his power, if whatever his tactics have been, move on.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Memphis owns it. They beat them 5 straight times. And Memphis is awful. So what does that say about the Bucks? They're the most overrated team in the NBA, hands down.
Michigan and Boston College, there's going to be goals scored in this game. But without being stated, the total's up to 7.5 right now. I got to go under 7.5 here, Scott.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. Your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell Coast to Coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Break.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports Today. Matt Striker and Joe Pisapia with you here, giving you everything you need in order to dominate, whether it's season-long fantasy, DFS, or straight-up wagering. We've got you covered. It's time for 3 Up and 3 Down. It's a fun little segment that we do here. It's obvious. We don't need to explain it to you. We're going to discuss 3 players that are on the uptick, 3 players on the downtick. And what I love about these discussions, Joe, is that they inform deeper discussions, because some of these downtick players could be buy low candidates. Some of these uptick players could be sell high candidates. So I'm going to start with a name that, now, I know you're going to be shocked, but hear me out. Some say he could be one of the 5 best that we've ever seen. Others say he is the most overrated guy in the world. But right now, Mike Trout is silencing the critics. Your thoughts?
Well, what a surprise. Mike Trout is good at baseball. I love this whole Mike Trout is back narrative, as if he wasn't always great. He's always been great. He's an older player that is not stealing bases anymore, so his fantasy value is taking a bit of a hit. But, he's been fantastic. The problem is the team he plays for is not fantastic. Going into this weekend's action, he's got 6 homers, 8 runs, 8 RBI. At one point, he had driven in 10 runs on his last 10 home runs, and that tells you all you need to know about the Angels. It's just not a good situation here, which brings up a bigger point to me, which I think is really interesting, because it's always a matter of how many games you're going to get out of Mike Trout. You're going to get 80, you're going to get 120, 130. Ooh, you get very excited. If you're the Angels, you already missed the boat last year. I don't know how many times I went on the diatribe, but I went on the whole thing here about if they don't trade Shohei Ohtani, it's the biggest mistake this organization's ever going to make. Sure enough, it was the biggest mistake this organization ever made. Because what happened? He ran the risk of getting hurt. He got hurt. Next thing you know, what do you have to show for Shohei Ohtani? And that's a huge problem, because trading Shohei Ohtani at that peak in July of a team getting a bat and a pitcher that good, off the chart value back. God knows what kind of return they could have gotten. Even if it was just something like one great player, which I'm sure it would have been more than that, it would have been something you could hang your hat on. Now, who knows? And I fear they're going to make the same mistake here with Mike Trout, because Mike Trout is healthy. Mike Trout has a big contract. And although Mike Trout is the guy that you've built this organization around, Mike Trout's been to 3 playoff games. The Angels are not going to the playoffs this year. Spoiler alert. It's not a prediction, in the words of Paul Heyman. That, my friends, is a spoiler. The Angels are not going to the playoffs. So, what are we going to do here? We're going to look at Mike Trout and say, who could really benefit from having Mike Trout on their team? And I keep saying, if there's one team that I think is all in, that has the goods to get a deal like this done, that could send the Angels a bunch of Major League ready prospects, it's the Baltimore Orioles. And how fascinating would it be to see Mike Trout on the Baltimore Orioles? They've got Kierstad, they've got Kowser, they've got Westberg, they've got guys for days in this system. Holiday's already up. They've already got Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman. They've got now Jackson Holliday at second base. They've got Grayson Rodriguez. You don't have to touch any of those guys. You've still got a bunch of prospects coming through this. Connor Norby, Heston Kierstad, who I think is the next Will Clark with more power. There are guys right now in this system that you could still flip. You could bring in Mike Trout, and you already went all in there to bring in Corbin Burns. If you have Mike Trout for the next few years in the middle of this lineup, how incredible of a difference maker leadership sort of entity could Mike Trout be for this young team? And finally, Mike Trout would be in a playoff scenario. To me, it's something that I'm keeping a very close eye on. And if I'm the Angels, I'm going to strike while Mike Trout is healthy, and I'm going to try to move on if I can for Mike Trout and for the betterment of the organization, because this organization is going nowhere fast. Your thoughts on this big trade that I have in mind for 2024?
I'm going to pause so that there's buffer there so that our department can cut that and get that out to social media as fast as you can, because to me, that is a fuse just for a conversation alone. Because at first I laughed, because in my back of my head, I'm thinking, you know what? Trout to the Yankees, they re-signed Soto, blah, blah. And then you come in with this right hook to the body that just drops me to my knee. The collective fantasy and wagering world would take a standing 8 count right there, to use the boxing reference. Never crossed my mind, makes total sense in this world. Also, from a logistics standpoint, Trout being a guy from the area, right? He would be just south of where he grew up. And also, from the money means everything, everyone will be able to profit off of that. And that, to me, is the bottom line. That is a brilliant, brilliant scenario. I'd love to spend more time on it. Hit Joe up on social media. Hit us up on social media. Keep the conversation going. We have an obligation to keep the conversation going about what Bobby Witt is doing in Kansas City. And what does it mean for the hitters around Bobby Witt? How can we profit, Joe?
Oh, Bobby Witt is in the MVP conversation this year, folks. He really is. I would be looking at the early numbers for him, because if the Royals do make the playoffs this year, it's going to be on the back of Bobby Witt Jr. 4 homers, 13 runs, 8 RBI, 3 steals already. He's got power. He's got speed. He is that dude. He's got a 358 batting average heading into the weekend and 1192 OPS. Those numbers are stunning, and they're nothing new of what we saw out of Bobby Witt last year. He was still that good. And one more point to throw out there, too, that I didn't even mention in the Mike Trout conversation. New ownership in Baltimore, too. New ownership likes to make splashes sometimes. And again, there's a lot of great prospects in Baltimore. There's not room for all of them on this team going forward. So you have to, at some point, make some hard decisions. As much as you want to keep everybody, you can't start everybody. That's a problem they're going to have to figure out. And if you're the Angels, you would get a bunch of major league ready talent that you could start in 2025 and show something, finally, that you're turning the page for this organization, looking to the future for the Angels. One more guy who's an up. How about a pitcher, Nate Eovaldi? Let's talk about him, Matt. 2024 so far has been very kind to Nate Eovaldi. He got off to a great start last year, too. In fact, we talked about buying low on him, because remember that first start was actually last year of 2023 was a little iffy in terms of the numbers, but all the projectables are really good for it. And after that, like that xERA, the xFIP, everything came back to a lower number, as we said it would. And Eovaldi was brilliant last year, brilliant this year too. 19 strikeouts, 4 walks so far this year, 1.45 ERA, and a sterling 0.80 whip. So Matt, Nate Eovaldi, once again, one of the best pickups the Rangers have made. And what really a lot of people were laughing at the Rangers a couple years ago. Now they got a championship. They look like, again, a team that's going the right direction in 2024. So I don't think anybody's laughing now.
Yeah. What's the most desired ability? Availability. And that rings so true right now. And now a guy like Nate Eovaldi gives you consistency. You know exactly what you're going to get. And it would be nice if we went into drafts remembering this April. Let's try to earmark it, because we have such short memories in our world, and it's designed to be that way, sadly. But those that can remember the past will be able to utilize it. If you drafted in the vein of the Eovaldis, right now you're sitting pretty. Or you drafted really strong in pitching, you're sitting pretty. I'm speaking from experience, because, Joe, I'm moving on to the 3 down now. I had a league where I just went out and tried to get every single best available pitcher that I liked. That was sans Cole, sans Strider. So without no Nolan, none of the obvious. One of the guys I went and reached for was Hunter Brown. And I'll tell you, in that league, I just actually released or dropped Hunter Brown and made a little outfield move because I had some injuries. Hunter Brown, droppable would be the way I would start this off? Question mark? Your thoughts?
I don't know if it's a question mark. I think, how can you not justify that? He's got a 16.43 ERA. Here's the one that really is troubling. 7 2/3 innings in 3 starts. That's troubling. But the 23 hits in the 7 innings, something's off here. This is tipping pitches.
Something clearly, right? Yeah.
It's a problem with him physically. It's a problem mentally. Whatever it is, it's a problem. And it's a bigger problem because look, the Houston Astros are 5-11 right now. They're at the bottom of the West. And I know Justin Verlander is working his way back. That's great. But outside of Christian Javier, they brought up Spencer Arrighetti. He got rocked. He's always been a guy that has control issues, so I wasn't running to the waiver wire to pick him up. Hunter Brown has been dreadful. JP France is JP France. And look, Ronald Blanco has been a good story, but you're really going to buy into a 30-year-old guy who was, pitching out in the independent league not that long ago? I don't think I am. Houston has an issue here, and Hunter Brown's going to have to get sent down. Look, if you can get him for cheap and just stash him on your bench, if somebody drops him, okay. But if you are desperate for pitching right now, and we talked about Lugo, we talked about Bradford, we talked about, some of those other names, those guys in Boston, whether it be Houck or Whitlock or Cutter Crawford, any of those guys right now, in a heartbeat, I would drop Hunter Brown for and just move on, because I think you have to. I think it's a bigger issue right now. Houston going forward has really got to hope and pray that Justin Verlander gets back to being Justin Verlander, because then at least him and Javier are at the top of this rotation, okay. But that's not enough if you're going to compete in the long term here in 162. They've got to figure something out, and it might be having to go get somebody else via trade. But this is where the scandal kind of pops up for them from years past, where they didn't have as many draft picks. So maybe the cupboard is a little bit more barren than you think in the Houston organization to make a move like that. The Shane Biebers of the world who are going to be on the move this year in 2024 potentially, he's on the move to not pitch this year. So all of a sudden, it's just a really tough market for starting pitching right now, and I think Houston is kind of up against the wall.
And again, what a lot of people maybe won't take into consideration is think about the draft capital you spent on Josh Hader. And what does that do to the conversation now? I mean, there's always ripple effects when you put too much in. With regards to Houston, I've just been playing straight away, and I don't like to play parlays, but it's the only way in April to make plus money on top of stolen base plays. Altuve Alvarez, put them together or something with Tucker. I mean, honestly, Joe's right. We're going to have a real problem in Houston for a while, and it's not Joe Espada's fault. Let's go now to Colorado. This is another player where I know a lot of people reached for in drafts. They love the Colorado effect, but you say he's turning a corner here. Talk to me about Nolan Jones.
Yeah, look, it's April, okay, folks, so let's not freak out here. Nolan Jones has 2020 potentially flashed it last year. I know it's been terrible going into this weekend's games, 51 at-bats, no homers, still 23 strikeouts, hitting .157, a .481 OPS. All that is dreadful. It's sad. But last couple games, this weekend against Toronto, 2 hits on Friday, 2 hits on Saturday, starting to pull out of it. He had a home run, his first homer on Friday night, so things are going better for Nolan Jones. People want to drop Vinny Pasquantino a week ago. He got red hot. Just be patient. If this was a stretch in July, nobody would care or blink. But because he's a young player, because it's April, people are overreacting. If you can get Nolan Jones in a trade right now, you do it. And another guy, too, that I think you want to be poking around on is one of the many buy low Seattle Mariners, and it's Jorge Polanco. He was one of the big offseason acquisitions. Seattle struggled. George Kirby with Luis Castillo. The pitching struggled. The hitting has struggled. Another slow start for Julio Rodriguez. What else is new? Buy him everywhere, too. But Polanco, 48 at-bats going into the weekend's action. 1 homer, 19 strikeouts, a 167 batting average, and a 488 OPS. He's been terrible, but he's not going anywhere. It's his job. Right. He's still going to be hitting in the middle of this order. And guess what? Eventually, Julio's going to heat up and start getting on base. And when he does, it's more opportunities for Polanco. Polanco might get dropped in a lot of leagues. If he does get dropped this week, pick him up. He's going to be okay. Is he a great player? No, but is he a guy that can contribute? I think the answer is yes. So, again, it's only April. Guys like Nolan Jones, who had great seasons last year, who play in Colorado, if somebody's panicking about Nolan Jones, be the hand that takes him off that team and puts him onto your roster, and you'll be very happy for it. Again, perspective is everything, and I think Nolan Jones is going to be just fine, just like Pasquantino was, and just like a few other guys that had some slow starts in April. When we return, some fascinating numbers about a Pirates starting pitcher might just blow your mind. We'll tell you who when we come back after this break.
People that bashed him will be eating their words this year. Pretty heavily favored to be a first-round pick, minus 400 earlier this week. But that's not the surprise.
If you're drafting J.J. McCarthy in the first half of the first round. You clearly believe not only is he a starter, he's going to be your starter for years to come. But
a popular bet was under 3.5 wide receivers in the first round.
The tape doesn't lie, baby.
Only on SportsGrid.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Jason Tatum has games where he has stinkers. He shoots a 4 for 16. Jaylen Brown in the playoffs gets exposed because he can't go left. Porzingis gets old. Sometimes Drew Holiday's not consistent. Al Horford father time to catch up. That being said, I still think they're going to the NBA Finals and winning it. And I'm a Knicks fan. I hate the Celtics with all of my might.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
They're still the best. They're still the champs. Everyone wants to crown the Celtics the champions, but that's not the way it works. They got to beat them. And, they got to get through the East, which isn't going to be fun to begin with. Everyone thinks it's so automatic.
If it's just Boris is kind of losing his power, if whatever his tactics have been, yeah, move on.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Memphis owns it. They beat them 5 straight times. And Memphis is awful. So what does that say about the Bucks? They're the most overrated team in the NBA, hands down.
Michigan and Boston College, there's going to be goals scored in this game. But, with that being stated, the total's up to 7.5 right now. I got to go under 7.5 here, Scott.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. Your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell Coast to Coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Break.
All right, welcome back into FST, Fantasy Sports Today. Matt and Joe with you here. And folks, I'm going to pull back the curtain. When your producer on the count in is telling you about a specific feature on a wagering site, you know you're listening to the right show with the right people doing the right things here. And now it's time for stat of the day. And by the way, our producer was touting the hit run RBI. If those of you out there on your platform have that, in the last season, a lot of people were printing money with that, so you can look for that. It was with regards to Juan Soto. But this is about a pitcher, Joe, and the stat of the day is?
About a Pirates pitcher, no less. A Pirates pitcher that's been absolutely spectacular. Jared Jones, just unbelievable. And here's a stat that tells you just how unbelievable it's been. 73% of Pirates starter Jared Jones pitches this year have been strikes. So this is a guy that is pounding the zone, a guy that is getting swings and misses, 18 innings, 25 strikeouts, just 2 walks. The control's been there. The whip is at .94. Will there be limitations in innings? Yeah, at some point. But right now, you want to talk about a guy that is saving your rotations bacon. It's Jared Jones, another guy that you could have gotten basically for free at the end of drafts. So I think everybody's starting to come around to the idea of what I've been preaching now for 2 years, which is stop wasting early picks on starting pitching, folks, because it's not a good investment. It's just too volatile to take a first or second round pick and use it on a starting pitcher. Plus, you're going to miss out on elite offensive players. You don't want to miss out on Bobby Witt or Corbin Carroll or Julio Rodriguez or any of those guys like Matt Olson. You need those guys to win championships. You can find pitchers if you do the work and are committed. And Jared Jones is one of these guys. And when Paul Skeens gets to this rotation sooner than later, Pirates are going to be a very interesting team again to watch. So keep an eye on the yellow and black there in Pittsburgh. We come back in hour 2, a little bit of waiver wire. We'll make some trades, and also we're going to talk about the NFL draft stock and some players that are rising with Derek Brown. In hour 2 of Fantasy Sports Today, folks, starts right now.